Do we have quorum?
Yes, we have quorum.
We're good?
Everybody in? Yeah. Wait.
Oh, yeah. Peter's here. Perfect. Hi, Peter. Very good. Just about to move a motion. First of all, I'd like to say hi to my friend Peter. Thanks for being here. My neighbor in British Columbia. I put a notice to the committee 2 days ago, but an administrative motion. I'd like to move that motion now. I move that the committee authorize the clerk to distribute all committee documents to Peter Fragascato, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Revenue. And I just note that Peter took the time to be here today for the motion.
There is a motion on the floor to distribute documents and welcome P.S. Fragascatos. And I know you were a longtime member of this committee.
I was, so it's nice to see Mr. Julian again, and here today for Ms. Zarowitz, here today also for the motion, but to colleagues on all sides, I'll be sitting in as an associate member from time to time, and I really look forward to working with everyone, and of course you, Mr. Chair, or esteemed Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fragascatos.
No problem.
So
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, call to order. Yes, I know that the committee asked that 2 ministers appear. Minister Freeland came to the committee yesterday.
The motion that was put on the floor by Mr. Beach. So we'll debate that, and then I will hear your point of order.
Parfait.
I'm looking for discussion. No discussion? Okay. So it is passed, yep. If you can distribute to the documents. Does everybody have a copy? I believe it's been distributed. It has been?
Yeah, so now we'll distribute all the documents to Mr. Fragascatos going now.
Okay. And now we will distribute all the documents from Mr. Fragascatos. Okay, thank you very much. And now, Madame Larouche.
Alors, tout à fait.
Mr. Chair, call to order. As I said, I know that the committee asked 2 ministers to appear for committee business. Minister Freeland appeared yesterday. I discussed this with my colleagues, and it's appreciated. But the Minister of Canadian Heritage has not yet appeared. What is the position? Was that minister invited to appear before the committee?
Has been invited for this Monday, and then also we had what other days?
Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Of this week.
Yeah, of this week. Okay. So, members, welcome to meeting number 7 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Pursuant to the House of Commons Order of Reference adopted on December 2nd, 2021, the committee is meeting on Bill C2, an act to provide further support in response to COVID-19. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you're aware that the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Today's meeting is also taking place in the webinar format. Webinars are for public committee meetings and are available only to members, their staff, and witnesses. Members enter immediately as active participants. All functionalities for active participants remain the same. Staff will be non-active participants and can therefore only view the meeting in gallery view. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. Given the ongoing pandemic situation in the light of the recommendations from the health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person are to maintain a 2-meter physical distancing, must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room, and it's highly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including when seated. Must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizer at the entrance of the room. As the chair, I'll be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank members in advance for their cooperation. To ensure an orderly meeting, I'd like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately, and we will ensure that interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. The raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen can be used at any time if you wish to speak or alert the chair. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the Board of Internal Economy's guidelines for mask use and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you're on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our very best to maintain consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they're participating virtually or in person. To members and witnesses, when you have 30 seconds left in your questioning time, I will signal you with this paper just to keep on track. Members, just before we get started with our officials today, we'll be going through 3 rounds to give enough opportunity to ask questions on C2. I'm leaving the remainder of our meeting time for some committee business. I would now like to welcome witnesses from the Canada Revenue Agency. And we have with us Yannick Caron, Chief Financial Officer and Assistant Commissioner, Finance and Administration Branch, Kathy Hawara, Assistant Commissioner, Compliance Programs Branch, Mark Lemieux, Assistant Commissioner, Collections and Verification Branch, Frank Vermaiden, Assistant Commissioner, Assessment, Benefit, and Service Branch. Clerk, one of the witnesses is going to make an opening statement, or will just one? Okay, so one of the witnesses will make an opening statement for 5 minutes before we move to members' questions, and that will be who will be making the opening statement. One of the witnesses who will be making.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Vermaiden.
Correct.
Okay. So you have 5 minutes, Mr. Vermaiden.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm having some technical difficulties, as some people in the agency today are, so hopefully you can hear me loud and clear. So, merci de.
Thank you for inviting me to appear before this committee today to provide you additional information about the work we are doing. The agency has been implementing benefits related to COVID-19.
Assistant Commissioners of the agency, namely Kathy Hawara of the Compliance Branch, Mark Lemieux of the Collection and Verifications Branch, and Yannick Caron of the Finance and Administration Branch. Mr. Chair, over the past 20 months, we have delivered support to both Canadians and businesses through several emergency support benefits, including the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the CEWS, the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, the CERS, and the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, CRSB, and more. And I'm proud to say that these benefits have been instrumental in Canada's economic recovery. In fact, Mr. Chair, the CEWS has helped more than 5.3 million Canadians keep their jobs, with over $97 billion in support already paid through the program to help employers rehire workers and avoid layoffs. De plus, la subvention de.
Additionally, the CRS has helped more than 215,000 organizations with over $7 billion in support for rent, mortgage, and other expenses.
Recovery sickness benefit has delivered over $829 million to 750,000 Canadians. This benefit has provided income support to employed and self-employed individuals who were unable to work because they were sick or needed to self-isolate due to COVID or had an underlying health condition that put them at greater risk of getting COVID-19. That is why, Mr. Chair, the Canada Revenue Agency will be proud to continue to administer COVID-19 supports and benefits should Bill C-2 be approved. The proposed legislation would continue to provide targeted support where it is needed to those Canadians and Canadian businesses who are most affected by COVID. In fact, the proposed legislation would extend the Canada Recovery Hiring Program until May 7th, 2022, which was introduced in Budget 2021, and would provide a subsidy of up to 50% to eligible employers with current revenue losses above 10%. Cette prolongation.
This extension would help businesses to continue to hire back workers, increase hours, and create the additional jobs that Canada needs for a robust recovery. This bill would also deliver targeted support to businesses still facing significant pandemic-related challenges.
This proposed legislation would support individuals who are affected by illness and family obligations through an extension of the Canada Recovery Benefit and the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, as well as by establishing the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit to provide income support to eligible workers who are directly impacted by COVID-related public health lockdown. En conclusion, je tiens à souligner.
In closing, I would like to emphasize that the CRA's mandate is to administer tax benefits and related programs and to ensure compliance, thereby contributing to the ongoing economic and social well-being of Canadians.
The agency remains committed to supporting Canadian businesses, as we have since the beginning of the pandemic, by putting Canadians at the center of everything we do. The CRA employees are very proud to have supported millions of Canadian workers and businesses following our People First philosophy. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and we'd be happy to answer your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vermaiden, and that was excellent timing. We are moving now to questions by our members. This will be the first round. It's 6 minutes each. We're going to commence with the Conservatives and Mr. Stewart for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and of course, all questions through the Chair. I'd like to thank the witness for being here today. We had a motion, and as a committee, we felt it was really important that CRA had representation here. Over the course of the past week, we've had a very difficult time getting answers to questions. We know that the Finance Department and all of our witnesses previously couldn't tell us where the money was coming from, the money that's going to be used. FinTrack was here and let us know that they were not consulted with the drafting of this new bill, even with respect to their, warning CRA yourselves in the summer of 2020 of the potential that these benefits could be defrauded. So, on behalf of my constituents today in Miramichi Grand Lake and always through the Chair, my first question is, well, number one, I hope we can break the streak and get some answers today. What role did CRA play in the drafting of the last emergency response bill related to the pandemic, the one previous to Bill C-2?
I'd ask the members just if you can maybe direct your question at
My question's at the Canada Revenue Agency.
Or one of the witnesses that we have before us.
Well, whoever wants to answer it.
Sure. Maybe I could start, and others welcome to provide additional comments. So certainly part of our job is to work with other agencies when we have to administer something and there's legislation there. We look at it, we provide comments, and try to make suggestions on potential improvements. Of course, the responsibility for the legislation is, in the case of the business benefits, the responsibility of the Department of Finance, and in the case of the individual benefits, primarily responsible for employment and social development. So It's their legislation, but of course, there are others that will participate in providing comments to make sure that the legislation is administrable, I guess is the word, and any other comments that we might have for improvement. Of course, our role is not a policy role. In that sense, our focus is really on the administration.
So you played no role whatsoever in the drafting of the bill? You're saying no? Is that?
I'm saying that's not our that's not our primary responsibility. We can provide comments on it. Certainly, the justice representatives from the various departments are all participating in these processes, but the responsibility for the legislation ultimately, in the case of the individual benefits, like I said, falls with ESDC and its Department of Finance for the changes.
Clearly, I understand what your responsibility is, but my question actually is a yes or no answer. And if it's no, just say no. It's okay. I mean, you're here. You might as well answer the question. Nobody else has.
I'm trying to answer the question as accurately as possible. That we participate, we provide commentary, and so therefore. We certainly think.
I have to interrupt you there. I asked a very specific question, and if the answer is no, the answer is no. So I'm going to just take that as a no, because clearly you're not answering it. So,
Point of order, Chair.
So the next question I have.
I just wondered if we cannot. Why do we have to push word into the mouth of the witnesses? I mean, they provide an answer. You cannot reframe the question.
It would help if we don't have crosstalk, but we'll allow the Mr. Stewart to continue.
Yeah, well, I mean, I asked a very simple question. And if the Canada Revenue Agency is coming in here today and they're not willing to answer the question, they're not doing anything for my constituents. They're not doing anything for this committee.
Well, I'll raise a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Are answering the questions. I have been listening, and we'll allow Mr. Vermaiden to answer the question. If he wants to repeat his answer to the question, then allow Mr. Vermaiden to then repeat his answer.
I'll ask a new question. We'll move on
Mr.
from
Stewart.
that. He doesn't want to answer that one. That's okay. What role did the Canada Revenue Agency play in the drafting of the current bill? And what did you do with the information FinTrack provided you at the Standing Committee of Finance in July of 2020?
Perhaps I could turn to my colleague, Monsieur Lemieux, to discuss the FinTrack feedback.
So I think the question of how do we manage the information we receive from partners and stakeholders in terms of potential fraudulent activities is that we take that information and we adapt our controls accordingly. So this is an ongoing function that we have in the agency. We've always had that concern of potential fraudulent activities from criminals that are trying to defraud the agency. And we always are in contact with authorities to make sure that we are aware of any potential schemes. And we continue to evolve our program and adapt the delivery of our programs to make sure that we close those doors if ever we find them. And we're not, we're not isolated from what's happening in the world. Any private or public organization is subject to those attempts, and we invest and make sure that we have the people and the tools to detect those attempts and add, when necessary, corrective actions. And we were made aware in the summer of 2020 of potential fraudulent activities, and we've adapted our programs and our practices accordingly. Now it's
we have for Mr. Stewart. We're moving over to the Liberals. Mr. Baker for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to start by thanking the witnesses for being here today, the civil servants from the Canada Revenue Agency. And I want to start by actually thanking you for the hard work that you've done in delivering the programs and helping to deliver the programs that have rescued countless businesses, that have helped Canadians put food on the table in a desperate time and during a global crisis. So I think I speak for my colleagues when I express my gratitude to all of you for your hard work, and we thank you for that. I'd like to also just, before I ask my question, I do want to speak to what Mr. Stewart had said. Chair, I am disappointed because questions that keep getting asked from the Conservatives continue to get answered, yet they pretend they haven't been answered. One of the questions that Mr. Stewart alluded to that he said wasn't answered was where the funding was coming from to pay for the measures in C2. The very day that was asked, I on the record, and you can check the Hansard, I on the record read the section of C2 where it specifies where the funding is coming from. It's section 29. I'll repeat it again. From the Consolidated Revenue Fund. The minister was clear in answering that question when she presented to us here yesterday. On the question on the role of the Canada Revenue Agency in drafting the bill that Mr. Stewart asked repeatedly of the civil servants at CRA and argued that it wasn't answered, I thought that the answer from our representative from the CRA was very clear. They indicated that their role was to provide comments and input. The question has been asked, the question has been answered. On the first question, it was asked and it was answered. I think it's shameful that the Conservative members, some of the Conservative members, are pretending their questions aren't being answered. And I think it's shameful that they're treating our civil servants in this way, particularly the civil servants who have been part of the team who've delivered the programs that have been so important to millions of Canadians. So I want to put that on the record, Mr. Chair. My question to, thank you. My question to our witnesses is, my understanding is that the Canada Revenue Agency would be responsible for administering the new benefits that are part of Bill C2. So could I ask you to describe in detail the cost and the cost and the impact of delaying implementation of the programs in C2? What would be the impact for Canadian businesses and what would be the impact for Canadian workers?
I'd be happy to begin by answering that question. So I think probably as the committee is aware right now, without the legislation, we're in a situation now where individuals on the individual side aren't able to access the sickness benefit anymore. And the same thing is true for the caregiving benefit. So those supports obviously are important for those individuals that do find themselves in a situation with the ongoing pandemic in terms of being sick or having a daycare that's closed or having a child that's sick or potentially at risk for COVID, and they're not going to be able to work as a result, need to stay home. And this provides that financial support. That's not going to be available until the legislation is passed. I guess the new lockdown benefit obviously would not be available. And then you've got the benefits on the business side. Again, the new period is not available right now. And so in terms of benefits going forward, this legislation is needed so that you can provide the support, the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy in the new forms and in that particular sector of tourism. So, I would, I'm not going to speak for the tourism and hospitality sector, but certainly that's an area where there's a continued pressure. Not having these funds available is going to create challenges for them. I mean, we hear that. We are appreciative that we're not. I think people recognize the challenges of delivering these benefits and that the legislation needs to be examined. But at the same time, there's an impatience out there as far as delivering these benefits.
Could you speak to what that impatience is? Like what I hear you saying is these programs would be delayed to businesses and to Canadians. And so therefore, what I'm trying to get to, and I'm thinking about my constituents in Etobicoke Centre who might be watching this, right, to help them understand the importance of this. Like what would be the impact on the ground of delaying these programs several months?
Well, certainly several months. I'm sure the viability of some businesses are at stake here. I'm sure the fact that they would have to lay off people that they'd like to keep, even as the pandemic continues. And it's one of these things that I think the pandemic has continued a lot longer than all of us expect. So there's certainly businesses in jeopardy. There's people that will lose their job as a result. Can I quantify that today? No, but you can imagine by the size of these programs that they are very important and that they are providing important support for individuals and even macroeconomic support.
Thank you very much. I have 30 seconds left, so I'll be brief. In the last Parliament, the opposition Conservatives voted in favor of a motion to eliminate audits on the wage subsidy. And could you elaborate on the impact of suspending these audits?
I'll pass that to my colleague, Monsieur Lemieux, and Katia Awara.
We're moving over to the block, and Madame St. Clair. Wait, is it Madame Larouche or Madame?
Je vais céder la première question en
Miss Sinclair, I will give her my spot. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Mr. Clerk, to add to what my colleague asked, I understand that the Minister of Canadian Heritage has been invited 4 times this week and we've not obtained any response. Mr. Fonseca?
The witnesses?
Je pose la
Asking the clerk if we've received any response following the invitation that was provided.
So this is a question time for members for the witnesses. So this is not a question for the witnesses. It would have to come as a point of order.
Donc, en fait, bon, d'accord.
Very well. I just wanted that to be placed on the record of the committee. The clerk told us that he was invited and there was no response. My colleague, Ms. Larouche, will now ask questions. I gave part of my time so that Ms. Gagné could add this information before the committee. We just wanted to be sure that we had not received any response after inviting the minister.
Écoutez, je pense que pendant
I think when I had the right to speak, I could give some of my time to Ms. Sinclair. That's what I did.
Point of order, Madame Sinclair.
Non, ça faisait partie du temps.
No, it was part of the 6 minutes that we had to put questions to the witnesses. We have received the answer that we were seeking.
Yeah, your time that you have in the rounds of questions are for the witnesses, and as far as the point of order, it was answered by the clerk and by the chair. Your time continues to run.
Parfait. Alors,
I'm happy to see the officials from the Canada Revenue Agency. I'm here as spokesperson for seniors. And there's an issue that is fundamental and concerns CRA now. This has to do with the CERB. These are cuts that seniors have suffered, seniors who collected CERB because they were entitled to it because they had lost their jobs. At this time, these seniors were told that it was $2,000 for everyone. If you had lost your job because of the pandemic, you were entitled to receive CERB. Now, seniors are having their income being cut. Those of us in Quebec wrote to the Minister of Finance together with my colleague, Gabrielle Sainte-Marie, and we also wrote to the Minister in charge of seniors. Before the elections, we had been contacted by groups. These clawbacks are significant. We had about $400, and now we have about 180 seniors who have had clawbacks. 180,000, and 80,000 of them have had clawbacks on their guaranteed income supplement. I know that at CRA, the minister in charge of CRA was contacted in June 2020 by groups like the LACEF in Quebec that wrote to say that there were already concerns with regard to what was happening with the guaranteed income supplement. Groups wrote to the minister in charge of CRA to talk about the negative and unfortunate impacts of this. Letters were sent as early as June 2020 to find out what was going to happen with seniors who had received CERP and who will eventually suffer cost. We got to November 2021. My colleague Sam Gabriel and myself wrote to Madame Freeland and to the new minister in charge of seniors. So I would like to hear what you have to say about all these cuts.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to try to answer that question.
Mr. Vermaiden, yes, please, if you can answer the question. And members, again, if you could point your questions to the witness that you would like to answer the question.
Thank you very much for the question. So in calculating social benefits, the way the system generally works is that you're looking at an individual's income for the prior year. Individuals submit their tax return. Their income is calculated. And that income is used by both the CRA and some of its benefits it uses and other departments in terms of the benefits that they might pay and provinces and territories as well. So we have an income, generally it's a net income concept that is used. The departments then, in this case, ESDC would use the information feed that we provide to calculate the GIS, et cetera. So they're the department responsible for that. This is not to, so they're responsible for that department, responsible for that based on the income that we provide, which is always going to be the same.
Parfait. Écoutez, vous savez que le
You know that the GIS, some proposals were made by the bloc to make sure that there should be exceptional solutions for exceptional programs. The CERP could not be changed, so there had to be a possibility for people to work up to a certain amount. So the CERP was considered working income, and so that they should not be penalized. We also had to make sure that calculations be made irrespective of where the request was made and considering the current income. Is that something you could anticipate doing?
Well, like I said, we provide the information over to ESDC. ESDC is the one that does the calculation, and based on their legislation and regulations will determine how much an individual received GIS. That said, you know, I do understand that the Minister of Finance has made a statement with respect to this, that they are looking for a solution. But you know, this is a complex issue. When you're looking at individuals' income, it's in this case, because individuals got served, in some cases.
Thank you, Mr. Vermaiden. We are now.
CU comme un revenu de travail, ça nécessite des.
Welcome, Mr. Julian. I know you've been a long member of this committee for many years, but we welcome you here today.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm very happy to be back here. Congratulations for filling Winista's position as chair. I also want to thank you all for your service during the pandemic.
If you've got the answer, please give it. If not, I'll move on to the next one. And I'm looking for responses in writing in all of these cases. My first is regarding the Canada Child Benefit. How many recipients experienced a decrease in their CCB because they received payments from a COVID-19 financial support program? And what was the average monthly reduction in their CCB payment?
I don't have that statistic available. I can tell you, looking at the latest numbers that I saw, that not a particularly unusual year with respect to what happens every year. Some people will get more, some people will get less because incomes fluctuate. So didn't see any significant change in that. But of course, we can provide additional statistics on that. I just don't have them off the top of my head.
Thank you very much. Yes, if you could provide it to the committee in writing, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much. With regard to the Canada Workers Benefit recipients, how many have experienced a decrease in their CWB because they received payments from a COVID-19 financial support program, and what was the average monthly reduction in their CWB payment?
Same thing. I don't have the numbers available, but you are correct that as if an income goes up, their CWB in some cases could go down, and so you're going to see some of that. Likewise, when incomes go down, you'll see increases in CWB, and certainly because of the enrichment to the CWB, it does make things a little more complicated in terms of calculating, but we'd be happy to look for those numbers.
Yes, thank you very much. I think, as I'm sure you're aware, this is very relevant to the study of C2. Madame LaRouche mentioned the GIS, and that's an important reference. We know that over 80,000 people have been impacted by accessing the COVID-19 financial supports. Would you be able to tell the committee what was the average monthly reduction for seniors in GIS payments as a result of that clawback?
I would not. I'll just say briefly that it can be somewhat complicated because individuals received employment insurance, and that migrated to the CRB that was provided by ESDC. So isolating those impacts can be conceptually difficult, but certainly we can look at what numbers are available if that's what you're looking for.
Absolutely, and you would have those numbers. So I don't think this is something that we're asking for that's over the moon. You will have the numbers, and it is, again, very relevant for a study. Would you be able to give us a sense of what the anticipated revenue is that the government is looking to recover from CERB and CRB recipients under the LIM, the Low Income Measure?
I apologize. I'll turn this over to my colleague, Mark Lemieux, in terms of the impacts that we have. If you're looking for how much money are we going to recover in terms of overpayments, is that what you're looking for?
Yes, but for low-income Canadians. I mean, this has been a controversial subject, as you know, clawing it back from low-income recipients. So is there a anticipated revenue that you're expecting to see clawed back?
Well, if the question is, do we have a precise number right now, I'll turn to my colleague, but I'm sure the answer is no at this point, as this is an ongoing process to determine who is ineligible and where there are recoveries possible.
As Frank was saying, we don't have the numbers at this time. We haven't started to send requests for the reimbursement, so it's difficult at this time to give you a number. Though the approach that the agency takes in everything we do is to put people first, and when we do collections, recovery, we will take into account the situation of each individual and consider their capacity to repay. So in cases of low-income recipients, we have measures in place to offer flexibility and take their financial situation into account.
Thank you for that. But you would also have the figures internally. We've questioned Canada Revenue before, and you do have the figures in your database. So that's what I'm certainly looking for. Or Daniel Blakey, our finance critic, and I think it would be useful for committee members as a whole. Now, I'll go on to any analysis the government did around the anticipated impacts of canceling the CRB on low-income workers or on self-employed workers. I'm thinking independent contractors, workers on online platforms, workers on contracted businesses, on-call workers, temporary workers. Are you aware of any impact studies that were done or conducted prior to or after the CRB cancellation, of the impact of the cancellation of that program? And if so, will you table
Thank you,
it with
Mr.
the committee?
Julian. That question may have to wait for another round. We're moving to the Conservatives and Mr. Chambers for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Oh.
Yes, Mr. Julian.
You're very distinguished following the footsteps of Wayne Easter. Wayne Easter always allowed the questions to be answered. I've
Mr.
asked
Julian,
the question.
we had already breached the 6-minute mark, and for an answer to be answered, we would go well into 7 minutes. So
all they have to do is say
so
yes or
Mr.
no, and that they'll share that with the committee. That's a very brief answer.
So, Mr. Julian, well, it didn't sound like the answer was going to be so brief. So, Mr. Julian,
you don't know until you try.
It's all about fairness here and being fair with our time for everybody. So we're moving to Mr. Chambers for 5 minutes. Point of order.
I think Mr. Julian's request is entirely reasonable. Mr. Easter would normally allow just a few seconds to try and get an answer
Poilievre,
at the end.
So the meetings are being conducted in a fair way. I've been tracking time as efficiently as possible and ensuring that all members get their fair amount of time. Mr. Julian, when it came to
yes,
Mr. Poilievre, when it came to Mr. Julian's
Mr. Julian's not
request,
looking for any more time.
We already moved past the 6-minute mark.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're moving to Mr. Chambers now for 5 minutes.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order.
It's a very simple request, very simple answer. We've already taken more time on points of order than it would have taken simply to ask the officials, are there studies? Can you share it? That's the essence of my question. I would like to have a response, please.
I don't know if our witnesses have a yes or no for you.
Give them a chance to. If you'd let them speak,
Mr. Julian. But we are sticking, and you'll have an opportunity to get that answer in the next round. So we're moving to Mr. Chambers for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, with respect, I'll have to challenge that decision.
Okay. So, Mr. Julian, it is about fairness. And based on the answers that we have received from witnesses,
Chair, you've been challenged.
Yeah.
Put it to a vote.
Put it to a vote.
That's how it works. It's not a debatable motion. You've been challenged.
So the question is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? If you are in agreement with the chair, you vote yes. If you are against the chair's ruling, you vote no.
The challenge is to Yes. So the ruling would be not to allow the witness to answer because we did go over time, and we would be well over time.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Could we just get clarification from the clerk on whether or not time allocation is a challengeable ruling?
Every chair's ruling is challengeable, and I believe in this instance.
Can't hear you.
Let's just vote on it.
Every ruling by the chair is challengeable, and in this case, the chair ruled on the conduct of the committee, so it would be appropriate to challenge. We are ready to move to the.
Yeah.
Clarification. Does it mean that we have more than the time allowed to speak? If that ruling is accepted, that means we have more than the time allowed to question
Point of order.
witnesses.
Hope this isn't cutting into my time.
and it is up to the committee. But yeah, we would be going. We may find ourselves with if
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
If we might find ourselves.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order.
Monsieur Poilievre, I'm just trying to bring a
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
clarification.
I have a point of order.
Yes.
Yeah, you're.
First, I've got Madame Chatel. So it would mean that we can go well over the 6 minutes or 5 minutes.
No. Stop misleading the committee.
No.
Point of order. Actually, I have a point of order.
I have conferred with the clerk. And
Sorry, you have the obligation to recognize points of order rather than giving speeches. Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Poilievre.
Your decision to prevent the witness from answering the question has been challenged. That is a non-debatable challenge. If the challenge succeeds and your decision is overturned, then the witness will be given a chance to answer the question. That's what we're voting on. Stop trying to manipulate the debate and get to the vote.
Mr. Poilievre, clerk, the clarification is that, so if on this, that the witnesses would be able to answer the question, and that may go on for as long as that will take for that answer to be given. Is that correct? That is correct. So, if it goes on for a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes beyond the time.
Point of order.
Just so the members are aware. Yes, Mr. Julian.
Mr. Chair, I'm just asking for 10 or 15 seconds, not more. This is not an unreasonable request, and there is no precedent. It just means that normally you permit the witnesses a few moments to answer. That's it.
Mr. Julian, to be fair, if I thought it was only going to be 10 or 15 seconds, and the members are well aware from our meetings, I would have allowed that it would go on for 10 or 15 seconds. I just did not want to cut off one of our witnesses from an answer that I thought would be much longer, and then there would be an opportunity, though, in another
Point of order,
round
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Mr. Julian was very clear. He was just looking for yeses and nos. It was a two-part question. He said he just needed a yes or no on each one of them. You know very well that kind of a response could be given in under 10 seconds. So to claim now that you thought that would lead to many minutes of additional debate is nonsense. Okay? He just wanted to get a quick answer to his question, which has been the practice on this committee. I was on this committee for years. It happened without problem. And by the way, your decision has been challenged. That is non-debatable. Let's get to a vote on it.
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order.
Mr. Poilievre just said this decision is not debatable, and he spent more time debating than anybody at this committee. So I think, Mr. Chair, this is my point of order, Mr. Poilievre, not yours. I think, Mr. Chair, you were trying to answer, rightly so, a clarification that a member had asked about the implication of the vote, which is a fair question to ask before one votes, is to understand the implication of one's decision when they vote. So that's what Ms. Chatel was asking. You were interrupted in the middle of that. I thought that was completely fair. So I think we're clear now on Ms. Chatel's question.
And just for clarification, if it may be a short or it may be a long answer, but this is what we are voting on.
And I have a point of order.
Yep, point of order,
because
Madame
I
Chatel.
want to know what is the consequence of allowing more time. And I have a proposal to allow this person to answer, but not create a precedent. I'd like to stay on time. I don't want the 6 minute allowed to us becoming 15 minutes. So an exception for this witness, but not a rule, and we should stay within our time.
Point of order, Chair.
But there could be a challenge any time in regards to the timing.
Chair, just
Yes.
point of order.
Mr. Vargas-Gatos.
Could we just suspend for 2 minutes? Just to calm
Okay.
things a bit and...
Yeah, we'll suspend for,
Suspend for a
yeah,
couple
let's suspend for 2 minutes.
You'll recall, Mr. Chair, my question was whether there has been studies of the impacts of canceling the CRB on low-income workers and self-employed workers, and whether they would be prepared to share those studies with the committee.
Mr. Vermaiden, can you hear us?
Yes, certainly. Happy to answer that. I am not available of any formal published studies on this. I will, if I may, supplement that, yes, Department of Finance and Employment Social Development do, of course, have been looking at the need of these programs, and the strategy has been one to evolve these programs to fit the economic situation. That's why the CERB, when it started, was giving benefits to about 4 million people in that first week, I think. And, over time, as we move to the CRB, the CRCB, we're down to, I think, we were down to 800,000 people who were using it a little while ago. So, not sure whether I don't think there's been like a formal study that says at that point, as far as a published study, but certainly there's been, the responsible departments, ESDC and Finance, have been looking at the needs of these programs and how they should evolve with the economic situation and pandemic situation.
Vermaiden, Mr. Julian, now we're off.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for reversing your earlier decision. We could have saved a lot of time if you had done that at the outset. This in your short time as chair, this is not the first time that you've caused disruption in the committee. I would encourage you to look back at how your predecessor, who was also a Liberal and a member of the government, tried to stay out of the debate rather than trying to favor one side of the debate, as you did yesterday. Your role is to facilitate the debate.
Poilievre?
You are a servant and not a master of the committee. So I just wanted to put that on the record and to thank you for reversing yourself. Thank you.
Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Baker.
I have to respond to what Mr. Poilievre just said. I think, Mr. Chair, you have tried to be fair to all members on all sides of this committee, and if there's been any disruption, for the most part, it's been caused by Mr. Poilievre and some of his antics at this committee. And I think you've done the best you can to try to keep these meetings productive and treat everybody.
Is this a point of order, Mr. Chair? Is this
Point of order?
Is this a point of order?
No, we are moving forward. We're going into the second round. We have Mr. Chambers. I want to respect the witnesses. They are here to provide answers to our questions. Mr. Chambers, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had quite some time to think about these questions, so I hope they're good. Thank you, Mr. Vermaiden, and all of the officials that we see here and appearing before us today in front of the committee. I want to also thank you for some very detailed information that you provided to this committee upon request. Understand that was done in very, very short order, and it was very detailed. And I would focus a few of my questions on that information. We just received this when the committee started, so just looking for a little bit of clarification. So if you want to pull that document up, that would be helpful. With respect to some of the audits and the numbers, it looks like, and just correct me, I'm looking for clarification. With respect to Qs, there were about 700 audits completed in Phase 1. This is post-verification, as I understand, and about 2,500 currently in progress. Is it safe to say that's about 3,200 audits out of an approximate 4.7 million applicants or applications? Is that a fair characterization?
I can take that. I can take that question.
Yes, Ms. Awarta.
I'm getting some echo. I'm sorry. Hopefully this will be okay. So just to clarify, Phase 1 of the audits is actually still ongoing. So it was more of a sort of preliminary research audit phase, if you will, as we were learning more about the risks and how best to deploy our audit resources going forward. So the 700 audits, you're correct. That's the number. They are not all completed, though. So that work is still ongoing. And we were able to launch our second phase in November this past year, or just this year. Those are just about to get underway or just getting underway. And
Interpreters
And
are,
the
Ms. Awara,
results-
sorry to interrupt you. Our interpreters are receiving a popping sound, so you have to move your mic a little bit up and a little bit away from your mouth. Yeah,
Is that better? Hopefully this is better.
just a little higher.
So just to say then that the results will
great.
inform our future audit activities in this space. So we're not quite there yet. It's
Thank-
still ongoing.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. And I just noted on the CRB audits, it said will be conducting in 2022. So is it safe to say there have been no audits, post-verification audits on the CRB so far, or did I read that incorrectly?
Mr. Chair, I could take this question. So,
Monsieur Lemieux?
Yes, so we haven't yet begun the post-verification work on the CERB.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for providing that clarification. We heard testimony yesterday from the Department of Finance. I can't recall if it was the minister or a witness. The a medical certificate would be or potentially required in an audit, but I read in the document provided that there was a decision made to not seek a medical certificate. Is that I'm just trying to, which one is correct? Will we ask for a medical certificate for sickness benefit audit or no?
So, Mr. Chair, on this, as we indicated in our written response, the decision was made not to request those certificates as a step to validate the eligibility for the program. And it was done in terms of, the reason was to protect the health system from the pressure that it could have generated. And that means that those certificates are most probably not available for a post-verification work. So that means we will have to ask for information that the recipients would have to make the demonstration as to if they are or not eligible.
Thank you.
And we will.
Thank you very much. Thanks for clarifying. Final question. We did hear some information from our friends and officials at FinTrack. My question is, and they raised some questions and concerns. My question is, have we contemplated or made changes to the post or prepayment verification process based on some of the information and advice or uncovered by FinTrack?
Answer, please.
So I can take that one.
Go ahead again.
Just to say that we're constantly evolving our risk assessment processes and our pre-validation processes as we learn more, as we have learned more throughout the pandemic, both from our own experience and from what our partners are telling us. So we do continue to evolve those risk approaches that we've been taking.
Thank you again for your responses.
Thank you. And now we're moving to the Liberals and Madame Chatel for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank all our colleagues from the CRA for the excellent work you're doing. I know that you must have administered those programs at a time when all Canadians had to work from home, sometimes under very difficult circumstances. So I really wanted to extend my admiration. I'm sorry in the way that my Conservative colleague, Mr. Stewart, asked his questions is not a good example of what we expect people to ask questions or to put questions to people that they themselves have invited. So please accept my apologies on behalf of my colleagues. I would like to talk about the Auditor General's report for 2021. We heard a lot about audits that have been done, and I have the English version.
The audit was whether the Canada Revenue Agency designed a mechanism so that the benefit would support eligible workers who suffered a loss of income for reasons related to COVID-19 pandemic, including limiting abuse of the benefit. I would like to see if the CRA could explain what exactly is the finding of the Auditor General in this very recent report.
If I may, Mr. President, I'll answer in French. Alors, le gouvernement du Canada a...
The Canadian government quickly provided benefits and recovery benefits during the pandemic, and this was verified by the Auditor General's office. They had to find out whether the approach was reasonable. The approach that was adopted was to use a system for these recovery benefits to make sure that Canadians receive the benefits they needed quickly. This approach, based on an attestation, is similar to the ones that are used at CRA for income tax statements. The basic hypothesis is that people want to comply and that they will provide tax declarations that are valid, and it's on that basis that we worked with that program. The Auditor General's office, in their study, said that there are some risks associated with that approach that was used. They have to speed up payments to people, and this is consistent with what is being done, and it's a principle for controlling fraud under emergency situations. So there are precedents. This approach has evolved, and it was also demonstrated by the Auditor General's office that as we progressed with implementation of the program, controls were modified before payments were made. So controls were added when we realized that there were risks of non-compliance, but the agency's approach is based on attestations and based on educating people, giving them the right information to help them comply with our laws. So a lot of information was provided to Canadians for them to understand the situation, to see whether they were admissible, and in some cases it was documented also by the Auditor General. We wrote to Canadians when we had information, giving us information that they could not be eligible. Thank you very much. But the report is positive when it comes to the way in which you reacted, considering the circumstances and the way you had to act fast. I recall that when we appeared before the committee the last time, when we were presenting the report, I thought we were talking about good news at that time. Thank you, Ms. Chachel.
And Madame Sinclair Desganay.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question goes to anyone who could answer the question. Madam Minister and the officials from the Finance Department said it was very complicated to target one particular sector when payments are made. Could you give us more information about that?
I'd be happy to start to answer, but certainly my colleagues, I'm sure, will supplement that. Yeah, it is a challenge to target payments to a sector simply because there are borderlines. Whenever you create any sector, you're going to have a challenge about who's in and who's out, no matter how well the legislation is defined or previously the rules are established. So I think if I look at C2, I think it's under the circumstances as far as establishing borderlines. I think it's done an excellent job to try to articulate as much as possible borderlines of tourism. But you can imagine how there's always a borderline situation. So if you are, for example, providing food and you are a chip truck, a poutine truck. Now, are you a restaurant? Are you simply selling chocolate bars and chips? So those kind of questions ultimately can never be fully specified in legislation, and therefore the CRA will need to do its job at looking at the facts and trying to distinguish, are you in this sector or that sector? And that's the challenge.
Parfait, je comprends bien.
I understand. So you're telling me that a G7 country is not able to target specific sectors when it's making payments? Does that justify the need for another program to be created, slowing down processes for culture workers to be able to have access to help that they really need? Is it because of the very complex computer systems? So I better understand the stakes, if that's what you're saying.
So I'm not sure I understand the question. Is the question, would it be difficult to target the cultural sector? Is that what you're saying?
En fait, je répondais à
I was responding to your response by saying I understand it's very difficult to target a specific sector because of the complicated computer systems. I'm out of time.
Move to the NDP and Mr. McGregor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So to all of the officials who are joining us today, I would like to know whether there have been any impact studies or analysis regarding the Canada Recovery Benefit cancellation for self-employed workers. If you have any comments on that, or if you can share with the committee or table any documents to that effect. And if you need clarification, like on who I'm specifically referring to, this would be, for example, independent contractors, any workers who have, online platforms, workers on contracted business, and both on-call workers and temporary workers. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification, if I could clarify, you're asking whether we have seen any studies on that? Is that the question, sir?
Yes. Are you aware of any impact studies or like an impact study or studies that have been conducted to assess the effect of the CRB cancellation on those classes of workers?
I am not. And again, I'll just reiterate that this policy, it's an ESDC policy, Department of Finance. They're both responsible for the policies here. We're responsible for the administration. Okay, but going forward, I think Mr. Julian covered this question before with respect to the CRB. Do you have any analysis, and I'm looking specifically for an analysis on the decision to end the CRB, including the financial profile of CRB recipients as a group? Like, can you expand maybe a little bit more on the previous question he had asked, but this is really in respect to an analysis. Sure. Well, as I had said previously, I don't. I'm not aware of any formal analysis with respect to published papers. Certainly, ESDC has been looking at the issue about what kind of benefits are needed over time and how that's evolved. And, so what I observed from CRA is a clear pattern about how demand for that product, we'll call it that financial support, has gone down significantly over as the pandemic as the economy has strengthened. So is there a black and white answer to a study that says it is needed, is not needed? I don't believe there is. I think what we're seeing is programs evolve both on the individual and business side. And I do want to stress the business side, that those benefits are also helping people get jobs, retain jobs, And so it is those type of benefits. And there's, of course, a range of other benefits out there.
Mr. McGregor, that's the time. We're moving to the Conservatives. Mr. McLean for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank the officials for coming today and giving us the answers that we need to make sure we're moving this bill forward. But I will comment, and I want the officials to know that many of us on this committee have enough background in finance and economics. We understand that the Consolidated Revenue Fund is just a bank account. The money still has to come from somewhere. And I encourage my colleague, Mr. Baker, on the other side to understand where that money must come from to arrive in the Consolidated Revenue Fund in the first place. It will add a lot of value in that respect. But Mr. Vermeten, you asked, or you commented earlier about the impatience on the delivery benefits that certain people are going to require once this bill is passed and getting this bill passed. This is definitely a rushed timetable that's been placed upon us here. This committee was composed literally this week, and we're looking at what this bill should be. Is this, first question, is this historically unusual to jam a bill this quickly, a spending bill this quickly in front of a finance committee immediately after Parliament is called?
I'm not qualified to answer that. I will say the last 18 months have been extraordinary in terms of my career. I've been working for the government for nearly 32 years, and things are done much faster than they were before. The CERB, for example, was introduced in 3 weeks, including the legislation. So I'll say these are still extraordinary times, but I have no expertise in saying whether after the opening of Parliament, whether this is extremely quick or not.
Thank you. No, would you say that a delay of several months from an election and then refusing to call Parliament back for 2 months would have caused this rush and this?
I think Mr. McLean was elected in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, so he will know that putting explicitly political questions to public servants is not appropriate, and that's where we're not wavering into. We're in that sphere already, so I would just caution my colleague that he's putting public servants in an impossible position.
Thank you. Would you suggest that that's unusual for a government not to be sitting when they had to deal with these types of urgent financial matters? Mr. Vermeten?
I have no comment on the matter. I do know that at the agency we've continued our work throughout elections, throughout the winter, throughout COVID.
Yeah, okay. And here we are. So let me ask one final question if I can, because I think my time's probably running up soon. Oh, good. There's an investigation going on about CERB distribution of funds in Calgary, in my city in particular. Can you update us on that investigation, please?
Perhaps I could turn to one of my colleagues if they're aware of the situation and if they're in a position.
Yeah, and for a little more clarification, there's allegations of political interference in manipulating attempts to get more money from CERB by political candidates, and I'm certain you're aware of it, and I just would like to know where in the process that investigation is, if you could, please.
I'm not aware of an investigation of that nature, and I think it would be fair to mention that we're not investigating these things. It's for other authorities to do the investigations.
Okay. As far as the fraud that's been perpetrated through CERB, and I know that it's when you rush things out like this, you can't catch everything, and there will be some things fall through the cracks. Have there been some learnings from the mistakes that have occurred along the path here so they don't happen with this program?
So, Mr. Chair, Jannick Parent, can you hear me? Jeannick Caron here.
We can hear you.
I will take the question. Thank you for the question. As you mentioned, with programs of this scale, there is going to be some fraud, but we definitely learned. We have controls, tools, measures in place, and we work with partners like the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and other government departments when we detect suspicious activities, and it's been a learning experience. Every cases that have been flagged to us and that we've uncovered ourselves, we take very seriously and we investigate. And as scammers adapt their practice, so do we. We routinely monitor accounts for suspicious activity to detect, prevent, and address the potential instances of fraud, including, unauthorized use of stolen credentials and unauthorized
Thank you.
taxpayer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are moving over to the Liberals and Mr. McDonald for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And listening to this conversation, I just want to say for those listening outside of these four walls, the vast majority of Canadians are honest, and we all believe that. But I just wanted to touch on Mr. Julian's comments too. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the minister was on the record committed to addressing the negative interactions between recovery benefits and GIS, and I just want to make sure that we actually mention that. But I would like to follow up on Mr. McLean's questions and allow the answers, because it was one of the questions that I actually had was relevant to the checks and balances going forward. So if she could follow up with, continue with her answer, it would certainly be appreciated.
With regards to learning, Mr. Chair, is the question directed to, with regards to learning from fraud?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. So, as I said, we've continued to definitely learn throughout the process. We increased the capacity in the teams. We created a new team to coordinate all of the efforts so that we could share information as well and make the linkages between all of the behaviors that we're seeing. Of course, we won't disclose all of the controls that we have, nor the threats that we are facing, but we are definitely learning. One of the key tools that we're using is data analytics and business intelligence gathered from many sources, and we've had many partners, law enforcement agencies, financial institutions have been key partners as well, and we also get leads. And thankfully as well, Budget 2021 has announced $330 million over 5 years that will, once approved, allow us to continue to invest even more in making sure that we protect ourselves, that we detect, and that we control. No taxpayers that have been confirmed subject of fraud incident are liable for the amounts that were paid, and we inform them. We've also had dedicated phone lines to help them, and dedicated phone lines, increased capacity as well in our call centers, because we do appreciate that created a lot of calls towards our organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Great answer. Sometimes around this table, the rhetoric, I think we forget how chaotic the beginning of this pandemic was. And I've been in public life for quite some time, and I don't think I've seen bureaucracy or bureaucrats react so quickly. So kudos to you and your team at CRA. I want to ask, relevant to the cooperation and communication between the different organizations relevant to fraud, what can you tell us about those lines of communications or those checks and balances that we had FinTech in here this week as well, but and the RCMP, we didn't have them in here, but I know they've been mentioned several times. Can someone elaborate on the verification of the checks and balances pre and post that go into ensuring that everything you do is doing it adequately for the taxpayers of Canada?
So we definitely collaborate, and perhaps Ms. Sawara will be able to complement the answer as well, because when we see For example, criterias that would be warranted of our criminal investigations team looking into the situation. Then we involve those experts into the files, and then they are the ones that interact very closely with the authorities as well and the RCMP. So that's definitely one of the partnerships that we have. And as I said, the partnership with financial institutions as well is critical. They have shared leads with us, for example. So we are very much working closely together. And I don't know whether Ms. Awara would have additional information.
You covered it very well. I would just emphasize there are very strong relationships between the Canada Revenue Agency, the law enforcement, in particular the RCMP and FINTRAC and others, in terms of supporting our mandate to investigate criminal offenses, tax evasion, benefit fraud, and so those partnerships are strong. They're working well, and we are engaged at the moment with them. So that's what I would say.
That's your time, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you.
We are moving into our third round, members, and we have the Conservatives up for 5 minutes. I have Mr. Chambers. Oh, Mr. Polyev.
Thank you. I have here the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada report on the CERB. It indicates the following. Criminal organizations using stolen ID and individuals recruited via social media are operating CERB scams in certain cities. Prepaid cards are loaded with CERB benefits and other laundered funds. Since CRA received this report, how many dollars has CRA recovered from pursuing the perpetrators of these scams?
So I would say our work is ongoing. These are complex cases, and I'm not in a position to provide an answer to that specific question yet.
Thank you.
But transparency is important. And
Thank you very much. The report further indicates that clients who do not meet the CERB eligibility requirements and who are fully employed still apply for and receive CERB benefits, often while engaging in suspicious financial activity. Since CRA received this report, how many dollars has CRA recovered from the people who fraudulently received the CERB, even though they were engaged in suspicious activities and were already employed?
So it would be the same answer as I previously
we don't
provided.
know. We don't
this
have.
Work is
No, I know the work is ongoing, but how many dollars have been recovered?
I don't have that figure to give you.
Okay. Have any been recovered?
I don't have that figure to
Who
give
would
you.
know? Who would know?
Our work in relation to the broader work in relation to our
Right.
audits of CERB recipients will start in 2022.
So, no dollars have been recovered? That's a question.
I don't know if Monsieur Lemieux might have an answer to that particular question, but on the criminal investigation side, our work is still ongoing. And my understanding is that the audit work for CERB, on the civil side, is only going to begin in 2022.
All right. So we're already the CERB began being paid out at the beginning of 2020, and you're not even going to begin the audit work until 2 years later. Well, I'll try elsewhere. This investigation by FINTRAC showed that clients have applied for and received CERB despite not living in Canada and appear to be residing in a jurisdiction of concern. How many people not living in Canada got the CERB? The number of people.
Unfortunately, we do not have an answer to that question. As we said earlier, when we receive that information, we
have the information. All right. When did your agency get this report from FINTRAC that I'm quoting from? Anybody?
Malheureusement, je peux pas répondre.
Unfortunately, I cannot give you a specific answer to that question concerning that report. What I can say.
Sure, you said you don't know the answer. Who is there? Anyone there who can tell me when your agency got this report from FinTrack showing all of this fraud and abuse? No one? Okay. Wow. I mean, the report goes on. It's stamped here with the date of June 2020. I'm not sure if that's the accurate reporting date, but are you aware of this? This has actually been reported on in the media. Is anyone from CRA aware of this report from FinTrack?
Comme je l'ai dit plus tôt,
As I said before, Mr. Chair, the agency is working with these agencies.
Aware of this document? Are you aware? Because this was reported in the media. It says that people got money they were not entitled to, that people who were not even living in Canada got the CERB. I'm asking a simple question. Is CRA aware of this report by this federal government agency that is responsible for money laundering and financial crime? Yes or no?
Mr. Poilievre, we've crossed over the time. If you could just answer the question very briefly, and then we'll move to the Liberals.
Mr. Chair, we are aware of that report. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Fragaskatos for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Great to be back at Finance Committee meeting. You know, one of the recurring patterns that I've noticed today, Chair, and I think colleagues around the table have seen it, is that Conservative colleagues are very preoccupied with questions relating specifically to audits, but also more generally questions around due diligence. I find it interesting and a bit contradictory, with all due respect, because just a few months ago, a former member, Conservative member of the Finance Committee, Mr. Kelly, and the letter was referenced earlier by Mr. Baker, he penned a letter to the Minister of National Revenue in November of 2020 calling for audits to be suspended entirely. These are audits on the use of the wage subsidy by small businesses. So I struggle to understand a little bit the Conservative position. But for the benefit of colleagues, specifically Conservative colleagues, I'll table that letter with the committee chair, and I think it'll help inform the work that's been happening here over the past few days. Two officials. First of all, thank you very much for your work throughout the pandemic and ongoing. It is truly appreciated by us, but specifically constituents in London. Where
Point of order, Mr. Chair. We'll give the member extra time if he wants to read that letter directly into the record at this point in time, please.
Chair, I'll table it, which is something I can also do.
Mr. Fragaskatos, continue.
Thank you very much. The number of CERB recipients is what I'm looking for, but I was just saying how appreciated CERB has been, and it's appreciated because public servants put it forward. But I believe the number is 8 million. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's the right range.
Thank you very much. Furthermore, I just wanted to ask standard prepayment controls, and this was touched on earlier, I think in a question that Mr. Julian had raised, but standard prepayment controls are used by the CRA for programs administered by the agency. That's very, not just common, that's just part of the approach, part of the mandate of the organization to put those controls in place. What are some of those controls outside of the pandemic? I'm talking about in normal times.
There are a range of controls that we use, both for the pandemic measures and other. You know, we check things. If it's for a business, we'll check the business number. We'll check how long they've been in business. We may check the size of their payroll. We may check past compliance records. So there's a range of things that we look at depending on the type of benefit it is, the type. The amount.
And Mr. Vermaiden, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but for individuals as well, checking their
Certainly,
hours
we do
worked
this-
and things like that, right?
Oh, well, certainly you're looking at things that depending on the program. Not easy, for example, to look at hours worked, but if, for example, for employment insurance, they have the ability for employees to be able to look at their employment record to get the record of employment from the employer
Yes.
and are able to verify that information.
Okay,
Of course,
and
it's
that's-
different in a situation of self-employed.
And that's in normal times. But in the context of a pandemic, very difficult to do. And that's why the attestation approach was used. Something that the Auditor General's report, it's the 6th Auditor General's report, Madame Châtel referenced before. For the benefit of the committee, this is not even a partisan comment. I would suggest members read that report. It's highly instructive. It gives very good insight on CERB specifically, some of the program design, but also some of the thinking that went into that program design. One of the key findings, and again, this is all in the context of an analysis that takes place on an emergency program, is as follows. I quote directly from that report, Mr. Chair, and since Mr. McLean was so eager for me to read something into the record, I'll indulge him. Here it's paragraph 653. It says as follows. We found, and that's the Auditor General, the Auditor General found by using attestations and limiting the number of prepayment controls to validate eligibility, the Canada Revenue Agency was aware that some payments would be issued to applicants who were not entitled to the benefit. This included potential cases of intentional misrepresentation. Key thing, though, is this. Accepting risks in order to expedite payments to those in need is consistent with best practices promoted by the International Public Sector Fraud Forum and its principles of fraud control in emergency management. So what we're left with is a really important insight, Chair. And again, to my colleagues across the way that have pressed this issue of due diligence. There were attestations, and if there's time, I'll ask about those. But in the context of the pandemic, public servants put forward an approach that, yes, did involve some risk, but was always made sure to focus on Canadians. The now close to, I heard Mr. Blakey whisper a few minutes ago, 9 million, 8 million, whatever the number is. I'll go with public servants on it, with all due respect to Mr. Blakey.
That's the time,
that they
Mr.
get
Fargas-Gatos.
the support that they need.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
We are now moving to the block, and we have either Madame Larouche or Madame Sinclair Deganay.
Madame Larouche.
Yep.
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I would like to quickly come back to the clawbacks on the GIS because of the SERP. Any of the officials could answer. Considering the SERP as an income, as working income, does that require legislative reviews or could it be done by directive? Quick answer, please.
This program is run by ESDC. I believe it would require legislative change, but I can't be 100% certain.
D'accord. Alors, si je comprends bien.
If I understand, we are 2 weeks away from Christmas and we cannot tell seniors what their budget will be. They continue to live under precarious situations. And Ms. Freeland, talking about a technological system, she said the technology was complicated. Could you tell us more? What are these technological challenges? In 2021, can't we find solutions to make sure that seniors who have suffered cuts be able to find a solution to their problems? Can't we find technological solutions to make sure that their issues are resolved?
Sure, I can give you a flavor of why there are technological challenges. The GIS determination was made after we received individuals' tax return for 2020. So that was done, we'll say, in June of 2021. Individuals have started receiving their benefits. Entitlements have been determined. And now, as far as a solution, you need to isolate, if this is the policy intent, isolate the impact of CERB and determine how that impacted the GIS, then figure out when you're going to give those amounts. Are you going to give them all at once to the extent you're going to provide an offset to who? And what happens to individuals, for example, who may have received CERB, then paid back CERB a little bit later? And we did have a lot of people who did pay back the CERB after. So there's all kinds of complex data issues, and you want to try to alleviate the situation rather than make it worse. And so therefore you need to, I would say, be very careful in moving forward to get it right.
Okay, that is the time. Madame LaRouche, we are now moving to the NDP for 2.5 minutes. Mr. Blakey.
Thank you very much. How ready is the system to go to pay the Canada Worker lockdown benefit if a region were to suddenly qualify? My understanding is that there are no regions that qualify so far, but if one were to qualify, how ready is that system to go, and how will it start paying out individuals?
The system is ready to go. We so once the legislation is in place, royal assent is received, we probably could activate the system within approximately 24 hours.
And there's an attestation, I guess, in that system as well. Like people will make certain attestations about their income and about their job situation.
It's correct. There's an attestation. Of course, there are also checks. For example, the areas of lockdown would be identified.
Sure. I'm wondering, in that application, would they identify what kind of job they have? Or what their work is, what their employer was? Would they include that information anywhere in the application?
Not that I believe.
Okay. Would it be possible for them to do that? Say if they had a multiple choice list that just said, hey, if Leo, do you work in this industry, that industry, that industry? Is that something that could be added?
Technologically, it would be possible. The information, I guess, could be used for statistical purposes.
Or, for instance, if the multiple choice list corresponded to all of the industries listed in Part 1 of the Act, tourism, hospitality, arts and culture, forget how many letter items there are. I think they're A through M or A through O. Then they could attest that they work in one of those affected industries and then receive the Canada Worker lockdown benefit even if there wasn't a lockdown order, say if the legislation were amended so that they could do such a thing. That would be technologically possible if it were incorporated into the attestation. I think that's consistent with your previous answer. Am I wrong?
I have to confess, I don't. Could you just explain to me what the goal you're trying to achieve? I'd be happy to try to give you an assessment.
Well, sure. Like the bill recognizes that there's a number of industries that are in distress, notwithstanding whether there's a lockdown order in effect in the particular area that people would be working in, geographical area, right? Mm-hmm. And they're listed in Part 1 of the Act. Now, if those industries are in distress, then self-employed workers, for instance, might need income assistance whether there's a lockdown order or not. In fact, the government says they will. That's why they're making the wage subsidy available for workers in those industries. So just wondering if people were to attest that they work in one of those industries and derive their employment income from one of those industries, the Canada Worker lockdown benefit could then be flowed to them regardless of the fact that there's a lockdown order. Now, I respect the legislation is not currently worded that way, but if it were, it would be technologically possible to implement.
Very short answer.
It would be technologically possible to ask for the information, take it on an attestation basis, and provide amounts. Yes, that would be a
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. That's the time.
Possible.
We're moving to the Conservatives for 5 minutes. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is directed at the CFO of CRA, Jenik, and it's in response to my colleague, Mr. McLean's question. Have the Calgary Police or the RCMP or any investigative agency reached out to CRA with respect to the potential CERB fraud and the involvement of certain politicians in that area?
Thank you for the question. I am not aware that we were approached with that information.
Okay. I mean, as CFO, you'd probably be aware.
Point of order, Chair.
Just a precision as a CFO, I'm not
Point of order.
necessarily involved in some of
Mr.
the
Fragaskatos,
criminal
point of order.
investigation.
This question continues to be asked. It was answered. Again, they're not politicians. And I know Mr. Stewart's new to the committee. We're talking to public servants today. Once public servants answer a question, continuing to ask them a line of questioning that is seems to be explicitly political is highly inappropriate.
The officials are not politicians.
Well, point of order there,
Stewart.
Mr. Chair. This, in response to that point, this is not a political question. It's very much an administrative fraud question.
As the, obviously, yeah, I mean, I seen it as a very important question, Mr. Chair, through the chair. Again, my question to the CFO of CRA. How much of the $7.4 billion is it going to cost Canadians to administer the program? Or is there an amount above that?
So thank you for the question. I believe that this was included in the information that we shared earlier with the committee in writing. And so for the measures that are included in Bill C2, the preliminary estimates at this point, the total cost is $184 million over 5 years to administer these programs. But they are preliminary estimates in a sense that we still have some analysis to do. We need to consult some of the other government departments that are partner with us, and these costs only include the CRA costs. But it's the best information that we have available at this time.
Okay, thank you. How many, what type of increase in employees are hired at CRA to administer the program? Do you have numbers on?
Right. Again, in the same exercise, in terms of the measures that are proposed in the Bill C2, we think that at peak time, so because we sort of increase and level off, but at peak time, we believe that we would need 650 full-time FTE, full-time equivalents to administer these programs.
Thank you. How much? If you're to take a look at the information provided by FinTract in July of 2020 and the reporting that they've done since, what do you think the total scope of the defrauded aspects of the prior program? What do you think that would total in terms of millions of dollars? Like, what's the ceiling on the defrauding amounts?
So I do not have that information, but perhaps my colleague, Monsieur Lemieux, and we've already indicated, I think, that the programs and our verification processes have not been, they're in progress, and in some instances they've not started, and so we don't have the full picture.
So is Mr. Lemieux going to answer the question?
Again, we haven't started the post-verification work on these programs, and we don't have an estimation of the fraud on those programs. As we begin that work, we will assess the risks, and we will determine how much resources we have to put. And we are going to be, as we provided in the written answer, we will be doing that work over the coming years.
Okay, so today we have obviously we have money laundered, we have defraud, which happened. Canadian taxpayers, my constituents in Miramichi-Grand Lake, certainly don't want to pay for any of that, and nobody's constituents here would want to pay for that. Anyone paying tax in their right mind doesn't want criminals to get their money. That no one wants to pay for it. So this has been going on since 2020 March, and nobody's investigated anything. How does CRA feel about that? I mean, do you think that's a good plan? You're going to wait 2 years to even think about going after the fraudsters, and now we're making another program with another $7 to $8 billion? So my question is, how is that benefiting the Canadian taxpayers?
Perhaps I can answer the question, Mr. Chair. From a criminal investigations perspective, I can assure the committee that we are working closely with our partners, and we are aware of the risks and possibilities of fraud. And as soon as we are able to share information, we will. But these are investigations that we cannot discuss. But we are actively working on this.
Thank you, and that's your time, Mr. Stewart. We are moving to the Liberals. Mr. Baker for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to cede my time, if I may, to Mr. Beach.
Mr. Baker, Mr. Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today, and thank you to the committee for all the good work that we've been doing over this week. I do want to take an opportunity to move a motion, and hopefully we can get through it quickly and have some more time with our witnesses before our time runs out. But it's become obvious, as we all know, that we lost Part E and Part F of the motion previously, but given the testimony that we've had to this point, I think it's been made very clear the urgency that is required in order to get these supports in place for not just our tourism businesses and other organizations that are hard hit, for people in communities right across Canada, especially during the break after the House rises. And I do appreciate the points that have been raised by colleagues, especially around the cultural sector, around impacts of benefits, especially income-tested benefits. And it is with that in mind that I would like to move the following motion. That, pursuant to the motion adopted on Monday, December 6th, the Standing Committee on Finance A, re-invite the Minister of Canadian Heritage and officials to appear before the committee for 1 hour at 11 a.m. on Monday, December 13th. B, that all amendments to the bill be submitted to the clerk of the committee by 4 p.m. Saturday, December 11th. C, that the committee proceed to clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C2 at 6 p.m. on Monday, December 13th. D, that at 10 p.m. on Monday, December 13th, every question necessary for the disposal of the SID stage of the bill shall be put forthwith and successively without further debate or amendment, and that E, the chair be ordered to table the bill in the House on Tuesday, December 14th. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Discussion?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order.
Point of order.
Yeah, normally we leave motions to the end of the meeting.
Well, there's a motion on the floor. Mr. Polyev. Yeah, discussion? Mr. Blakey? Mr. Blakey and then Madame LaRouche.
Yeah, we need to speak.
Thank you very much. Well, given that the motion does touch on witnesses that the committee would be hearing before the end of its study, I think, one of the voices that we haven't heard around the table yet is the voice of Canadian Labour. I understand that the Canadian Labour Congress is interested
Monsieur
in
le Président.
Mr. Chair, interpreters are having difficulty understanding him. Maybe he...
Speak a little
Okay, so
louder.
let's just wait till that. Okay.
It's been a lot. Is that coming through all right for you guys? Yeah, right on.
Okay. it's
We're
good
just
now.
saying
Merci, Madame LaRouche.
Thank you, Madame LaRouche.
the motion does treat the question of witnesses, and it may well be that this motion passes. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't hear the voices of Labour at the table. This is a bill and a pandemic program that has a lot of consequences for workers across the country. I believe the Canadian Labour Congress is quite interested in weighing in on this. So I would move to amend the motion to add, I think the motion says that the Minister of Heritage would be invited to appear at 11 o'clock. So I would move that we invite the Canadian Labour Congress to appear at noon for an hour.
I'd be happy to take that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, we have a friendly amendment to the main motion. We have Madame LaRouche, then Mr. McLean, then Mr. Polyev, then Mr. Stewart on our list. Yes, Madame LaRouche.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that motion had been adopted last Monday, inviting the Minister of Canadian Heritage on Monday so that we can continue the clause-by-clause consideration. As for the NDP's proposal, we'll see what the committee decides when it comes to that part, as from 12 o'clock.
Mr. McLean?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the motion. I'm just looking at the number of witnesses we've asked to be part of this committee so we can get some fulsome disclosure on the effects of what are clearly undefined parts of this bill and what the financial implications are going to be going forward here, as well as the people that are affected in that. So I think there's some important input that still has to come here, and I really want to make sure that we get that input. And I look at the names we've put on the list here. I look at FinTrack, which we've heard from. We do need to talk to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Macdonald-Laurier Institute, but really important, of course, is the Auditor General of Canada, because they do need to have some input on this legislation as well. We have other economists here that need to describe to us, from a Finance Committee point of view, exactly what the effects of unlimited spending, and as we've heard here, that $7.4 billion has no modeling associated with it. It has no end date. It's extended by 2 years when the program's only supposed to be extended by 7 months. It is deep in the weeds. The Fraser Institute, of course, would give us some explanation on this. RSM Tax Department, and finally the C.D. Howe Institute. These are all reputable institutions that could give us some guidance on how to make this bill better. And the fact that we're not even interested in trying to make this bill better at this point in time, and the rush timetable that Parliament's been called upon to deal with this very quickly because the money's needed. We know the money's needed. Money's always needed. And there's a retrospective portion of this bill, as you'll recall, Mr. Chair, that's also very clear about how people are going to be dealt with once this is over. But the spelling out the details of that are not yet clear. I would like that clarity, and if anybody can provide it, I think some type of explanation would be appropriate for this committee.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Poilievre.
Yeah, I have an amendment, but before I get to that, I just find it interesting. The Liberals learn that, according to one of the government's own agencies, the Financial and Transactions Report Analysis Center of Canada, that people defrauded the CERB, that people took the money even though they don't even live in Canada, that some people got multiple checks in the same week, even though we all know that it is
Mr. Poilievre, are you speaking to the motion?
Yes, I am. Yes, I
amendment?
am. Actually, I am, and I do have the floor. So thank you very little. So back to my point, the Liberals learn that basically the taxpayers being defrauded of money, that people are taking multiple CERB checks in the same week, even though that it's a once-a-week benefit, that people who are organized criminals are defrauding the system, that the people who don't even live in Canada are getting the money. And what do? How do they respond to that news? They say, well, let's hurry up and pass some more government checks, rather than saying, boy, now that we've learned about all of this misappropriation, we better look into how that happened. I think it's incredible that how little interest they have in scrutinizing how the money is actually spent, rather than just trying to shovel more and more of it out the door. So I would move an amendment to this proposed motion by adding the following paragraph. Sorry, before I do that, before I add the following paragraph, I will say by deleting all of the deadlines that the member, Mr. Fragiskatis, listed in his original motion, so references to deadlines for submissions of amendments and for reporting back to the House, and instead replace that with the following amendment: that the Standing Committee on Finance continue to hear witnesses' testimony on Bill C-2 the week of December 13th, 2021, that the clerk re-invite witnesses who were unable to appear on C2 due to scheduling conflicts, and the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister appear before this committee on the Economic and Fiscal Update 2021 for 3 hours prior to the House of Commons rising on December 17th, 2021, and that each answer that the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister provides does not exceed the time taken to ask the question. That would be the end of the wording of the amendment. Some context.
Point of order, Mr. Blakey.
I know Mr. Polyev said that he was moving an amendment to Mr. Fragascato's motion. I just wonder if the amendment's in order, because the motion on the floor, of course, is Mr. Beach's motion. I wonder if that was just a confusion.
Oh, it must.
Or
Yes, it was.
Or if we have an amendment that's out of order. So just if someone could clarify, either Mr. Polyev or the chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. In my old age, my sight has gotten so bad that I just way over there.
Mr. Polyev's amendment is in order.
Thank you. And if I did, there was two handsome gentlemen over there, and I just mixed up which was which, so I apologize for misattributing the original mover of the motion. We did, to her credit, the minister was here, but she specifically said that she couldn't answer certain questions because she didn't yet have a fall economic update. She specifically couldn't tell us how much debt we have in Canada or how much a 1 percentage point increase in interest payments would cost taxpayers. And she said, look, once the fall in economic update is introduced, I'll be able to answer these questions. And so out of respect for her, I think the least we could do is call and ask her to testify on her update. Now, this is conventional. When a finance minister introduces a fall update or a budget, typically they testify on it. Now, we're scheduled to close shop for Christmas, unfortunately, as early as it is. And so we would miss out on the opportunity for having the minister here to testify on her update. I know she will be anxious to testify. So I am putting forward this amendment out of respect for her request to have a chance to speak to some of my questions after that update is introduced. And I'm furthermore open-minded to working with colleagues on all sides to make sure that the final amended motion that comes out of this place is one that everyone feels comfortable supporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Chair, you'll have to forgive, this is my first time on the committee. I have a hard time, if Mr. Beach, who originally proposed the motion, if it is available in hard copy, or if you could email it to the rest of us. It's quite difficult to manage what we're actually voting on, but I would like to make the point that when we're talking about timelines and witnesses, like, we are actually cutting into witness testimony right now, for which we have already decided was important to hear before we get to a vote or, move on to clause by clause. I think it's important for this committee to actually feel comfortable that it's heard from all the witnesses. We know that some witnesses were unable to attend. We've heard a few others that have been invited, certainly from the labor organizations, and there were some others listed by my colleague. I think it would be imprudent to consider cutting off witness testimony or not allowing relevant time for those witnesses to come and provide their feedback on this bill. So I do think, we need to be careful about allowing an opportunity for members of this committee and affect the general public, the opportunity to hear from the witnesses that we had anticipated to hear from before we agree to move any more forward.
Thank you. I've got Mr. Stewart and Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support Mr. Polyev's amendment. I think the main part of this committee was to bring in the witnesses, and this is an astounding amount of taxpayer dollars. dollars that were never defined where they're even coming from. And I think the minister would be anxious to come back in here and answer all of the questions she couldn't answer already this week. She admitted herself she'd like to have more time to give more answers. So there's all of next week, and there's more time beyond that as well. And I think that to bring in as many witnesses as we could possibly bring in, the members of this committee would get to ask more questions. We get to delve into the $7.4 billion. We know the track record of the government with taxing and spending. We know the track record of the previous legislation. That's why FinTrack was called in here this week. We know that Canadian taxpayers have footed the bill for fraudsters, criminals, potentially even terrorist organizations. I don't think some of that's been proven, but it hasn't been unproven yet either, which is, this is something the Canadian taxpayers deserve the scrutiny of this committee. So I think the Mr. Poilievre's amendment is sufficient, and I think as members of this caucus, we want to be here and ask these important questions. And I think it's important for all of Canadians that safeguards are placed in the legislation. We know they were not last time. And I think it's going to be extremely important for the members of this committee to have the ability to ask those important questions on behalf of our constituents, on behalf of mine in Miramichi Grand Lake and the rest. So I support the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mr. McLean.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the amendment very much. I recall being here earlier this week, and it's our first week at Finance Committee, and we've had a week of meetings, which we've barely scratched the surface. And the minister was quite clear when she was here earlier this week, along with a high-level finance official that couldn't answer any question put to him about the economic situation facing Canada at this point in time, leading us very clearly to the answer she gave that the economic situation she would be dealing with in her economic update, of which we have the right, and I think the parliamentary privilege of actually asking those questions. So I think the amendment is clearly in order and would add value to Canadians, would add value to the respect this House has as far as looking at where government is spending money, how government is spending money, what the accountability for that money is, because at this point in time, many Canadians are looking at those accountability mechanisms as being completely lacking. We've got a bill before us here today, again, that refuses to be tightened down as far as what the applicability and what the definitions are around some of its applications. So think about that, because I do think it is a very, very compromising amendment that allows us to move forward with the business of Parliament while we also move forward with the business of passing a bill. That is what we're here for. Let's take our parliamentary jobs very seriously, be accountable to Canadians, and move forward with more than one dot on the map at a time. Let's move forward with what we're supposed to be doing here in Finance Committee, which is addressing the finances of the country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
McLean, Mr. Blakey.
Oh, thank you very much. I just wanted to take a moment to say, the bill got here rather quickly out of the House, out of certain collaboration in the House, and to the extent that it seems like there's a plan for how this is going to happen. I'm glad to be able to get one more of our witnesses here. I wonder if the Conservatives, you mentioned a number of witnesses, if you want to suggest a priority witness off of that list. I think sometimes the art of Parliament is to know when the jig is up and to get as much done as one can in the circumstances. And so if there's a suggestion from the Conservative bench on a priority witness for them that might be invited to accompany the CLC at noon, that's something that I would urge them to consider while there's still time, because it sounds to me like the bill is heading to clause by clause, and it would be good to hear from more people in the time that we have available. Anyway, I know free advice isn't always appreciated at these tables. So take it for what it's worth, and we'll see if there's anything more to say.
See no further discussion? Oh, Mr. Poilievre.
Yes. Can I get a report from the clerk on the witnesses whose names were put forward who have not been able to appear?
Clerk is pulling up that information.
In terms of the conservative witnesses, we've not been able to have Franco Terrazzano from the Federal Director, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We didn't have Philip Cross from the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. We couldn't get the Auditor General. We couldn't get Jack Mintz from the University of Calgary. We could not get Michelle Kelly-Gagnon from MEI. We couldn't get Jason Clemens from the Fraser Institute. And that's it for the conservative list. Do you want me to continue with the other parties?
Can you just remind me, was there any conservative witness that actually did come?
Yes, there were. There was Fintrack at the first meeting. And yesterday there was Mr. Steve Saretsky.
Ah, Saretsky. Thank you. Is there anyone else on the speakers list right now?
We've got, so I had Mr. Blakey. Who is next? Mr. McLean?
Sorry. Okay. Mr. Chair and Mr. Clerk, I know we spoke yesterday, and I know that you attempted one time for some of these witnesses, but we talked about not being available for one specific day. It wasn't the same as not being available in responding to this bill. So I know since our discussion yesterday, I had understood you were going to reach out to some of the potential witnesses that could come here, particularly the Auditor General of Canada, and appear before this committee prior to having it rushed through this committee and then back to Parliament. Has that been met with any success in the last day?
Mr. Clerk? I do know that the clerk has been working tirelessly to get witnesses in and has done a commendable job in terms of in short order to be able to do the work he's done. I believe it was we have for the Minister of Heritage is what we reached out to for Monday. Okay. Any further discussion?
Could we ask for a 90-second break to consider Mr. Blakey's advice? He gave some free advice. We're considering whether to take it.
Okay, you've got 90 seconds, sir.
Okay.
Poilievre?
Yes, we would like to have the CRA officials back on Monday with the Auditor General.
Okay, Mr. Poilievre, as yeah, is this an addition to your amendment?
Well, I think we're right now into somewhat informal discussions. If there, I'd like to get response where we can move it in. We can go into the formality of a motion, but if we have agreement from the other committee members to bring back the CRA officials and bring the Auditor General, then we can very quickly and amicably amend the original Terry Beach motion accordingly. If there is no such consensus, then I guess we can proceed to debating.
For clarity,
we have a suggestion for Mr. Blakey, I think, which was intended to break the logjam, and what we've proposed is how we would go about taking his advice.
just for clarity, so we can maybe consider this as a friendly amendment, that visit would take place at the same time as Mr. Blakey's witness at noon on Monday?
We're flexible. If Mr. Blakey's witness is an hour before, and we move things around, we don't know. We're not insisting that it happen at the same time. The good news,
acceptable as long as it's at the same time, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Mr. Blakey?
Peace in the family.
Peace in the family. That's what I hear.
Just in time for Christmas. All right, so do we have agreement that those witnesses? It's friendly amendment.
Yes? Members, yes, there is agreement.
Right. So, I think what I will do then is withdraw my original amendment for now, and then, Mr. Chair, I'll let you confer.
Mr. Poilievre.
What I would then do is withdraw my original amendment, and the amendment, the original motion would then be amended to include the Auditor General and the CRA officials that were here today will be up here.
So will you get a reading
All right.
of this?
Mr. Blake, you would have to accept the friendly amendment to the friendly amendment.
Very well. I think the question we want to pose to the committee, Mr. Chair, is whether we have unanimous consent to add the Canadian Labour Congress, the Auditor General, and the CRA officials that appeared today to Mr. Beach's original motion as witnesses that would be invited, and those three witnesses would be invited for 12 o'clock. And I think there's some discretion for the chair as to whether they would come at 12 and come for an hour or for 2 hours. I'm certainly happy to leave that an open question to you to exercise some discretion.
Thank you.
Given the fact that there are more witnesses now for that space than there were before.
I understand. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Blakey, for that. Now, witnesses like the Auditor General, I know, have been invited and have not been able to attend our meeting. So, what would be the case if we did not, if they are not able to make it, and will that be built into the amendment?
Well, the motion as originally drafted and then amended was to invite, and that is what we'll do, and we'll do so in all of good faith, given the committee's will.
Can I speak to that as well?
Moment, we're just looking at the motion and just for clarity, what is it? Over here. Without further debate or amendment in Part D. Yes, for clarity.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm the legislative clerk for Bill C2. My question regarding the motion is the following. When in paragraph D, we say that at 10 p.m. on Monday, December 13, every question necessary for the disposal of the said stage of the bill shall be put forthwith and successively without further debate or amendment. I would like to know if in the part of the amendments, you are talking about the amendments that are in the package that were submitted.
Excusez-moi, Monsieur le Président.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Interpreters say they can't hear you. Please move closer to the microphone or remove your mask, maybe.
Yeah, so to clarify, we're talking about amendments necessary to clarify to dispose.
Right. The question I have for you is what you understand by amendments. Is that the amendments that were in the package that were submitted beforehand, or is that new amendments that will be submitted during the course of the debate? Sorry?
Any and all.
Okay, so the amendments that were in the package would not be considered.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Any proposed amendments to the bill would have to be.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Mr. McLean.
Yeah, I am a little confused by the motion because we are talking about any amendments being received by tomorrow, 4 p.m., and yet we are hearing from witnesses on Monday. So that's
Okay. Yep.
that's the reading I have. And
Let's hear from Mr. Beach.
Right. So we will finish off any amendments that may be debated, but we will not allow any new amendments. I was a little slow to your question. I apologize.
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Could you repeat that? Sorry.
So we'll finish any amendments that need to be debated, but we will not accept any new amendments.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We're good? Okay, no further discussion?
Yes, I mean, you asked what about if the so the problem with the amended motion is that Mr. Beach is now clarifying that this is just a friendly invitation. We want the witnesses here. That's what we're seeking in exchange for allowing the debate to terminate. We need the Auditor General here. This is a $7 billion addition to an already nearly $100 billion package. We need to hear from the Auditor General on where the money is, the previous expenditures have gone, in order to vote on these new expenditures. So the Auditor General, fortunately, serves Parliament. The Auditor General does not just come here when he or she desires. The Auditor General comes to Parliament when Parliament requisitions him or her. And so we're seeking the Auditor General. We want the Auditor General here. For Conservatives to support going to a vote on passage of this, we need the wording to be clear that the Auditor General will be here and testify before the committee is returned to the House of Commons. And so we are not prepared to support going to a vote on this until that is clearly worded in the motion. We hope that arriving at that outcome is not overly time-consuming. We should all agree, this is actually a fairly easy thing to agree on, that if we're passing a piece of legislation of this magnitude, that the Auditor General would come and comment. Mr. Fragiskatos has said that the Auditor General has produced reports on the predecessor programs. He has cited the AG's work in order to bolster the case for the bill. So he should have no problem supporting that that the AG or someone very senior in the AG's office, in the event that there's a health problem or some incredible extenuating circumstance, interrupts. But I don't think we're not asking for something unreasonable here. So I guess I see Mr. Beach. Let's see.
Could the clerk clarify for us the powers that we have and the abilities that we have? I mean, I don't think changes in language are going to help us here, with all due respect to my colleague across the way, but I think this is a good faith motion, and I would encourage them to adopt it.
Clerk?
I'm unclear what the question is. Powers in regards to what?
Well, without any sort of clear amendment on or change to the language as it's currently stated, I mean, I think that the language, with all due respect, accomplishes what the Conservatives are trying to do, and I would encourage them to support it. If there is some stronger language, I'm certainly open to hearing it, but I don't think anybody's trying to pull a fast one here. I think we're all trying to be collaborative. So, it is our intent that those three witnesses will be here on Monday, and I don't know what other solutions I can offer the member opposite.
It is up to the committee. Mr. McLean.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll beg your pardon on this side, because there are some things here I don't think we can meet. And remember, we talked about blocking out the space here about when we get this stuff done. So, Mr. Beach, if this is some clauses in here, we talk about 4 p.m. Saturday to receive the amendments. That's before, of course, we're going to hear any witnesses on this on the Monday, and I think those witnesses' input is going to be important. So I'm hoping we can say that's at 6 p.m. on Monday, when we can submit amendments based on the testimony we've heard here, as opposed to 4 p.m. Saturday. But I'd also like to say, there's one clause here, D, that says that 10 p.m. on Monday, December 13th, every question necessary for the disposal of the said stage of the bill shall be put forthwith and successively without further debate or amendment. And yet we are talking about amendments here. So is that just a misprint or an oversight? Or we are talking about putting amendments forth here. So two things: those two words, or amendment, and the date this Saturday to submit those amendments prior to hearing the witnesses. Can we change those and get the Auditor General in here to make sure that we've got the input we require on Monday?
Got Mr. Stewart and then Mr. Chambers.
My opinion is, Mr. Chair, alongside of my colleague, Mr. McLean, I think the importance of having the Auditor General here is very clear. This is a very large amount of Canadian taxpayer dollars, more than $7.4 billion. And I think that the government has repeatedly, proclaimed just how much they listen to the AG and how much they take the opinion of the AG so serious. I think it's prudent that we have the Auditor General here so we can ask questions about this $7.4 billion, and who better to have here than the Auditor General, alongside of CRA and other officials. So I think I just want to state the importance of that, and if the government is serious about their own assertions of the importance of the AG, they will absolutely support this, and this committee will ensure that the Auditor General is present here for these questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. We do, if we are going to continue for much longer, we would need to take a break, a 10-minute break for the resources that we have available to us here in this room. So I'm looking to members.
I think we're ready to vote, Mr.
Well, no, we're not. We still want to have the wording clarified, because it's not clear that we're getting the Auditor General before the bill passes. If it was simply a matter of inviting the Auditor General, we've already done that. It hasn't worked so far. So the Auditor General serves Parliament. We are a creature of Parliament. The Auditor General must be here to testify on this bill before it goes back to the House of Commons. And we want wording in the motion that would clarify that, or it will not go to a vote, because there are many more things that need to be said in this debate. And as you know, Mr. Chair, this is not a time-limited debate, nor can members be interrupted when they're speaking on a motion like this. It would be, I think, in the best interest of all committee members that we come to a conclusion that is amicable and consensus. But instead of just
for the House Resources, we are going to take a 10-minute pause. Okay. I suspend for 10 minutes. Here we are releasing you. We do thank you for your answers, for being here before the committee, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you.
welcome back, everyone, and want to thank the clerk and many around the table and staff and all others for all their hard work. We have got a hold of the AG, and it looks like the AG, she will be available from 12 to 1. Yes, 12 to 1. So we do have confirmation of that.
All the question.
No, if I could, I just want to make sure the motion reflects that the operation of the operation of the motion is dependent on her appearance and on the appearance of the officials from CRA.
Yeah, Mr. Beach.
So sorry, I'll take this off. The point of calling the AG and confirming was to give everyone on the other side assurances. We can't support that as an amendment. I'd hope that the motion as it is, including the new witnesses, is sufficient.
Mr. Poilievre?
If it is the case that she is going to be here and that the CRA officials are going to be here, then let's just put it in writing.
Unfortunately, I believe they have all the best intentions, and it's been confirmed by a clerk. But
Okay.
Things happen, right?
Right. Well, I agree. Let's talk about that then. So I want to thank the chair for reaching out to the Auditor General. I have to say there was some confusion about why the Auditor General did not appear when invited earlier on. That said, this committee obviously can't approve billions more in spending without reviewing the Auditor General's inquiries into earlier and similar spending. If the government really has confidence in the way the dollars were spent, then it should have no concern about having the Auditor General appear here to testify on that spending. Now, the members across the way tell me she's coming to this committee, but they're not prepared to put that in writing, which welcomes the question, why not? Are we expecting a last-minute cancellation? And if so, why wouldn't we just specify in the motion that a little bit of flexibility so that a rescheduling can occur? We have already, as Conservatives, indicated that we would even welcome another senior official from the Auditor General's office. It's rather unusual to allow that because, of course, the Auditor General is a servant of Parliament, and normally parliamentary officers show up here in a heartbeat when they are invited by committees. So I don't understand why, frankly, the AG hasn't already arrived and testified, having been invited. That is very peculiar. I actually have never seen it in my 17 years here, including several years on the Public Accounts Committee, that being the committee to which the AG reports. I also note that one of the conditions for Parliament granting expeditious passage of the COVID emergency spending was that the Auditor General would audit all that spending. We're now coming on 2 years since that condition applied. And by the way, this committee was the committee responsible for overseeing all of that. And we still haven't had the Auditor General come here and tell us her findings. So putting aside that this government is now asking us to pass another $7 billion of spending, which in and of itself has been rushed. It would have been normal business for the AG to come and testify regardless. We're saying, look, you don't even have to do that. Bring a senior representative in her place if she's not available. But for God's sakes, surely the Parliament, this committee can't approve yet $7 billion more without at least hearing from the auditor who is responsible for telling us how the previous $100 billion was spent. It's a very small request, actually, and I'm kind of confused as to why this is even controversial. I mean, I'm not expecting that the government's going to agree with my fiscal policy. Obviously, we have very different points of view. So if the...
Mr. Poilievre, I'm just going to interject. We not only have received verbal confirmation
put it in writing.
from
No
the Attorney
problem.
General. The Attorney General has in writing just received through the clerk that she will be appearing. It is in writing here. I take the Attorney General at her word that she will be appearing, both verbal and written.
Well, I welcome the Attorney General as well.
Auditor General, sorry, I apologize. I know I had the Attorney General. Auditor General, yes.
Mr. Chair, one final request. Could we invite Jody Wilson-Raybould to appear?
So, Mr. Poilievre, again, both verbal and written, the Auditor General has confirmed that she will be appearing on Monday.
Okay. Can I just confer with my colleagues for 60 seconds then?
For 60 seconds. Suspend.
Here, why wouldn't you just put that in the motion? Make it a matter of finality. We could be out of here and everyone could be on their flights and
I would be extremely happy to be out of here and be on my flight back to my daughters and my wife back in British Columbia. I think we've been pretty clear that this is an important bill, and we want to make sure that this gets passed to support Canadians. There has been verbal and written assurances that the Auditor General, I'm almost saying Attorney General now, that the Auditor General or some senior representative in their stead will be here between 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock on Monday, and I am looking forward to their testimony.
Mr. Beach, Mr. Polyev.
And if the Auditor General doesn't come, then we have assurances that the Attorney General will begin prosecuting Mr. Beach.
Mr. Polyev will stick to AG.
AG,
Yes.
okay. All right, listen, we are somewhat perplexed as to why you guys won't put that in writing if the AG has put it in writing. I've never quite seen anything like this where we're told that something is going to happen, but we're being asked to do it on faith. We will accept it this time, but we're early in this Parliament, and if there is a breach of trust on something like this, I can assure the committee, as you all know, that would cause this committee to devolve into unproductive chaos for the rest of the Parliament. Because the only way things ever work on these committees is if there is some level of trust that when one party, we fight like tooth and nail, when we make deals, when we shake hands and we make commitments, we keep them to each other, and that's how parliamentary committees and, frankly, this place actually gets things done. So we will assume, as I have every reason to believe, that Mr. Beach is acting honorably here, and that you, Mr. Chair, are likewise, and that the Auditor General will be here. But if that doesn't happen, then it would be a tremendous breach of trust towards the committee by the government.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to put on the record that I appreciate the member opposite's goodwill in this case, and I do also hope that we avoid extreme chaos at this committee and we're able to complete some good work on behalf of Canadians. And with that, I hope we can call the question.
Mr. Beach, and it is a friendly amendment, so we will...
Can you read the final motion we're voting on? It's been a little bit of a journey since it was
have
moved.
the final motion read.
The motion is as follows, that pursuant to the motion adopted on Monday, December 6th, the Standing Committee on Finance re-invite the Minister of Canadian Heritage and officials to appear before the committee for 1 hour at 11 a.m. on Monday, December 13th, that the committee invite the Auditor General, the Canada Revenue Agency, and the Canada Labour Congress on Monday, December 13th from noon to 1 p.m., that all amendments to the bill be submitted to the clerk of the committee by 4 p.m. Saturday, December 11th, that the committee proceed to clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C2 at 6 p.m. on Monday, December 13th, that at 10 p.m. on Monday, December 13th, every question necessary for the disposal of the said stage of the bill shall be put forthwith and successively without further debate or amendment, and that the chair be ordered to table the bill in the House on Tuesday, December 14th.
Clear?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So shall we put the motion to a vote? Okay, clerk.
Mr. Baker. In favor. Mr. Beach.
In favor.
Madame Chatel.
In favor?
Mr. Fragiscatos.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald. Mr. McGuire.
Opposed?
Mr. McLean.
Opposed.
Mr. Polyev.
Opposed.
Mr. Stewart. Opposed. Madame Larouche.
En faveur.
Mr. McGregor.
In favor.
Yeas pour. 7, 7. Nays contre. 4, 4.
Okay, motion passes. Yep, looking for adjournment. Okay, I think everybody's ready to go. Adjourn this meeting.